moving into this space tonight. You were out there marching. We are bringing that energy back into this space this evening. And we need you all, if you can. I know you're probably a little tired after that march, but we need you to keep on with that energy and stand if you're able, please. We are going to stand if you're able. And we are going to bring our voices up in this space tonight as we get ready to hear the people in our movement, to know why we are here, why we are lifting our voices and calling for the change that we know is both possible and needed. And so I'm going to turn it over to my brother Jamel to start us off tonight.
For justice,
I'm gonna let it shine.
Oh, as I'm marching for justice,
I'm gonna let it shine.
let them hear you as we're marching for justice.
I'm gonna let it shine.
Let it shine, let it shine,
let it shine.
Let the music play, let the music play, come on.
Come on, y'all. Let that light shine, y'all. Bring those hands up. Let me hear ya.
Everywhere I go,
everywhere, I'm gonna let it shine.
Oh, everywhere I go,
I'm gonna let it shine.
Come on, everywhere I go,
I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
Let it shine,
let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
When poverty pushes on us, when ecological destruction pushes on us, when racism pushes on us, when the war economy and militarism, stand up, y'all. Stand up, y'all. Pushes on us, when the distorted moral narrative of white Christian supremacists, you know it, right wing Christian nationalism, pushes on us, we shout back. We shall not be moved. Say that for me.
We shall not be moved.
We shall not be moved.
We shall not be moved.
No, 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 Smoveron.
No, 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 Smoveron.
We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree that's planted by the water. We shall not be moved. No, no.
Good evening, Philadelphia! So grateful to be here with all of you this evening. I know we still have some folks trickling in. We're coming off of a powerful march and about to enter a very powerful mass meeting as well. So grateful to First Unitarian and all of you for being in this space. I want to note that we have both ASL and Spanish interpretation here tonight. I also want to note, if you are not already a part of the Poor People's Campaign, you can text this number below and sign up for update for all of you for being here.
So, para las personas que hablan español, no hablan inglés, tenemos interpretación. Por favor, acérquense para que me pidan un aparato para que puedan escuchar la interpretación.
Good evening, Poor People's Campaign. How are we doing? I am Reverend Hannah Capaldi. I use she, her pronouns, and I serve this congregation here at First Unitarian Church of Philadelphia as the Minister for Faith Formation. My colleague, Reverend Abby Tennis, and I are so honored to be hosting this event, and we are overjoyed to welcome you in body and in spirit to the sanctuary here at First Unitarian, because there is a spirit moving in this space now. Can you feel it? Can you? In this sanctuary, you might notice a flag here hanging with the face of Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, a Unitarian here in Philadelphia in the mid-1800s, and she is one of our cherished ancestors because she belonged here, and she belonged at Mother Bethel, the first African Methodist Episcopal church in the country a few blocks over. Us UUs have always been affirming of multiple belongings, multiple identities. The God over there at Mother Bethel works for you some Sundays. The God here works for you some Sundays. That works for us. It's good for all of us when we can follow multiple paths to truth. And Frances Ellen Watkins Harper, one truth she fought for, and fought for hard. She believed that we are all bound up together. All bound up together, she wrote, in one great bundle of humanity. So, us, Unitarian to fight for one another's liberation. So that is just one reason, just one of the many reasons why this sanctuary holds a spirit that I hope will move amongst you now, enliven you, energize you, for we are all bound up together. So let us work together to bring justice here and now through the efforts of the Poor People's Campaign. Can I get an amen? Amen. And now, coming to us live, let us welcome the co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, Bishop William J. Barber.
Can you hear me?
Yes, they can hear you.
It is good to be with you on today. I want to welcome all of my Philadelphia friends. I'm glad we're in the Unitarian Church because God created a universe and not a monoverse. I'm certainly thankful for the Right Reverend Liz Theo Harris and her great leadership and wisdom, to the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign, New Jersey Poor People's Campaign, and Delaware Poor People's Campaign, and people who are joining in by the thousands all over the nation. This is our next to the last stop as we make our way to the mass Poor People's Low-Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls. June 18th, 2022 will be a day that will not just be a day, but a declaration. Before COVID, one study said that 700 people died a day from poverty, 250,000 people a year from poverty, not poverty that is God created, but man created, human being created. Put your heads around that. And now in COVID, we have found that, especially in the latter waves of the pandemic, that poverty has been the accelerant of unnecessary deaths in America. Unnecessary deaths among the 40% of people in Pennsylvania who are poor and low income, 5.1 million residents in Pennsylvania. People in Pennsylvania, those 14,000 people living homeless, those 2.3 million workers who make less than $15 an hour, and people who have to work 103 hours a week at minimum wage just to afford a basic 2-bedroom apartment, those 600,000 people uninsured. That the pandemic didn't discriminate, but we did. And in the counties and the cities like Philadelphia, the poorest urban center in the country, those with the lowest medium incomes, residents were 5 times more likely to die from COVID during the Delta wave than their fellow Americans who live in this nation's richest counties, and it did not have to be. And yet we also found recently that the government didn't even keep record of it, didn't even track it, didn't even make sure that we were not merely calling people essential, but then treating them as though they were expendable. We are a nation plagued by what I call hidden poverty. Just today in the New York Times was an article talking about how so many people just feel hidden. And what makes us most vulnerable is the basic moral contradiction that we have tried as a nation to ignore this poverty and low wealth for the last 50 years. Think about it. We refuse to face it in our presidential debates and congressional debates and Senate debates. When's the last time you saw one presidential debate for 130 minutes dedicated to the reality in the lives of 140 million people, 43% of this nation, 52% of the children, 250,000 people a year dying, and it's never brought up. Instead, it is covered up. Republicans say poverty is a personal issue, personal failure. Too many Democrats, especially moderates, often talk about the middle class and those trying to make it into the middle class, but refuse to talk expressly about poverty. Our debates instead get locked into this crazy struggle around trickle-down economics or neoliberalism, both of which even the Pope Francis has said are forms of magic and evil that can continue the scandal of poverty and allow it to be alive. Or we get caught up in these conversations about how much does it cost, rather than how much does it cost not to address the issues. And failure to name, failure to hear, failure to see the tears and to put a face on the havoc caused by the 140 million, caused to the 140 million poor and low wealth people in this country. And now 32% of the electorate in some states, 45% in others. But the failure to name it and show it and see it and hear it, what's happening because of the 5 interlocking injustices of systemic racism, poverty, ecological devastation, the denial of health care, the war economy, and the false moral narrative of religious nationalism. The failure to see it, failure to hear it, the attempt to cover it up is constitutionally inconsistent, morally indefensible, politically insensitive, and economically insane. And now, as we watch the unfolding tragedy in Ukraine, Americans are aware that the main and the Russian people is that we are witnessing the truth of human slaughter. It's everywhere. It's on the TV, it's on the radio. The Putin people and the Russians is hidden from them because of Putin's propaganda. And if the Russians could see, for instance, what we see, we know they could not allow it to continue in their name. But what is making the difference? What is making people respond? What even made the Congress a few weeks ago bipartisan say we're going to do more to help the Ukrainian people is sight, is seeing the ugliness, the death. Even when the president from Ukraine spoke before the Congress, he brought a video. He said, I don't just want to talk to you, I want you to see what's going on. But if this seeing is what makes people react, if it is true of human suffering halfway around the world, then it must also be true of the catastrophes hidden in our American cities. Homeless encampments, Walmart parking lots filled with families sleeping in cars, the poverty of Appalachia, the poverty of the Delta, the poverty in the city, because people hurting because of housing. Only 31% of this country being able to afford a $1,000 emergency. We must take it out of the shadows. We are no less culpable than the Russian people because we as a nation have been willing to go along with narratives that blame the poor or hide their suffering behind arguments about banning critical race theory and attacking the LGBT community. All of these things are attempts to blind us to what's really going on when it comes, and us making the nation not face its most critical issues. And it is our moral duty to see the suffering of other human beings. Pastor, you're so right. It is our moral duty, especially to see those closest to us, right, in our own communities, rural or urban. And when we witness unnecessary suffering, it is our duty to act. And if Russia's atrocities in Ukraine demand action, then so too does the failure of the United States Senate to pass a step, not even everything we need, a step called Build Back Better, provisions for affordable housing and green jobs and living wages for care workers and child tax credits permanently that would immediately lift 4 million children out of poverty. Yes, yes. If Putin's attack on democracy in Europe can unite Western democracies, then the assault on voting rights in the state houses across America must at the very least unite us, unite Senate Democrats, and unite others in their resolve to pass full federal voting rights protections and expansions right now, even before the midterms. If we look at the death we see in the streets of Ukraine and we're moved by that, then surely the deaths that we've seen before the pandemic and after the pandemic caused by poverty and policies that promote poverty that have created social murder, sure. $140 million poor and low income. The city team and make mass poor people's low-wage workers assembly and moral march on Washington and to the polls is not a day, but a declaration. impacted people, religious leaders, advocates, economists, lawyers, etc. We will be saying, we want to be seen. We demand to be heard, and we will not be unseen or unheard anymore. If this democracy is going to survive and be true to what it says on paper, then we must look at this. And when we look at it, we must change it. We must hear, and we must see that we must act now to reconstruct a society where everyone can thrive through the stories and the faces and the tears and the righteous anger, the policy demand and the data. On June 18th and beyond and going forward, we will make this nation see. June 18th is not an end, but a continuation, a growing agitation that says we must look at the damage and the deaths caused by the interlocking injustices that do not have to exist. And if Americans and people of goodwill can see the reality of poverty and see the policy changes that can happen and see that scarcity, the lie of scarcity is a lie, and the lie that we don't know what to do is a lie. If they can see it and we can open the eyes of this nation, then many will demand a response that shifts the moral narrative, changes the conversation about what is possible. And now, right now is the time for a moral movement, right in the midst of all the pain caused by COVID. Now is the time for a moral movement. The soul of our democracy depends on the eyes of the nation being opened up, and we must be forced to lament and to repent. So let's let impacted people speak. Let's make a call for a moral narrative reset. Let's place before the nation a third Reconstruction agenda. Let's build power, voice power, and voting power. Let's refuse to be silent or unseen. Let's make it clear children have to be saved. We can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. Sick folk have to be healed. We can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. Low-waged workers have to be paid. We can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. We can't. Housing for all must be provided. We can't and we won't be unseen and silent anymore. The atmosphere, the environment must be saved. We can't and we won't be silent and unseen anymore. Voting rights must be expanded and protected. We can't and we won't be silent and unseen anymore. Spending more money to blow up the world than money to save the world must be stopped. We can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. We won't be silent or unseen anymore because of Republicans who treat corporations like people and people like things. We can't be silent and unseen anymore because of regressive Democrats acting too scared to even say the name of the poor. We can't be silent and unseen anymore because of every so-called moderate that is more interested in doing the least they can do than doing justice for all. We can't be unseen and unsilent and silent anymore. As long as there are mansions and cinemas who will take donations from the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and sell out the poor and the low-wage people in their own states and every state in this country, we can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. It's time to have a meeting, a moral meeting, a meeting of all those who know right from wrong, a meeting of the heart, the mind, and the soul, a meeting of those who refuse to give up on the true possibilities of this democracy, a meeting of those tired of being rejected and ignored, a meeting that says once and for all, until things shift, no matter how long it takes, from June 18th until we are going to intensify and embolden our agitation. If we have to march again and again, if we have to vote like never before, if we have to go to the streets, lay down in the street, engage in nonviolent civil disobedience in every city and every rural area in this country, as long as this nation can pass an infrastructure bill, but can't pass living wage bills and a health care for all and a voting rights bill and guarantee housing and public education for all, we can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. As long as politicians who get elected have everything, we are demanding for all the people, but then choose to block them for the people. We can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. The actions of too few are hurting too many. The actions of too few are causing social murder throughout the land. And we can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. There must be a meeting. And if we have to bring more media attention to make sure everybody sees what's going on, then so be it. Because we're going to do it until the truth is told, until justice comes, until change comes. As long as we have breath in our body, as long as God is God, as long as any politician's policies are hurting the very people God wants healed, helped, and made whole, as long as God says, let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream, as long as God says every nation will be judged by how she treats the least of these, as long as God gives us strength, gives us love, gives us grace, gives us power, as long as God is greater than any gone astray senator and puppet politician and president and Congress or state legislature, as long as God wants a world where everybody's in and nobody's out, there must be a meeting, there must be a movement. The time is right now to do right, and we can't and we won't be silent or unseen anymore. June 18th, the Mass Poor People's Low-Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington. Be there.
There indeed must be a meeting. And that's why we're calling for one and organizing one. I'm going to ask the tri-chairs of the Pennsylvania Poor People's Campaign to come up and welcome us. And then we're going to keep on hearing about why we must have a meeting and not be silent and not go away silently into the night, but keep on organizing. So come on up.
Good evening, Philadelphia. You all look so beautiful. So glad to be here with you. My name is Nijmi Zakia Zarinko, and I am honored, one of the tri-chairs of the Pennsylvania campaign, along with Professor Borja Gutierrez and Rabbi Michael Pollack. Give it up. I want to thank you on behalf of the amazing Pennsylvania Coordinating Committee. I'm going to call them out. I was raised all of my life in the state of Pennsylvania, and I got into this work through life experience. Life experience brought me here today, asking the question, why? Why is the social murder that Bishop Barber talks about happening? I saw that social murder even as a child. At the age of 5, I started asking why, and I never stopped. Over time, that led me into this movement, to the Poverty Initiative, the Kairos Center. We put out the call to reignite the Poor People's Campaign in 2008, and so I've been working ever since. I want to welcome us tonight to the Keystone State. 13 million people, 67 counties. The keystone in architecture is the stone that holds the structure together. And if you think about where we are right now in the Keystone State, we are part of Appalachia. We are part of the Rust Belt. We are part of the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic. We are right on the Mason-Dixon line in this entire country. And we have a lot of responsibility. Philadelphia is a fantastic city filled with wonderful people, and it's also the poorest big city in the United States. Tonight, you're going to hear from local and regional leaders not only about the plight, but also about the fight and the insight that comes from the struggle to meet our basic needs and to transform society. We know that, as the National Union of the Homeless says, we only get what we're organized to take. That's right. And you're going to hear from people beyond Philadelphia, because one of the things that we do really well in the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is we unite across lines of division that have been enforced upon us. Enforced upon us. They are not natural, they have been enforced. We don't allow ourselves to fall for the divide and conquer that pits people in Philadelphia against people in other counties in the state and vice versa. We reject that. We're about connecting the poor and dispossessed in Philadelphia to the poor and dispossessed in Wayne County, and Lancaster County, and Clearfield County, and Warren County, and everywhere in between. I want to say thank you to the Pennsylvania Coordinating Committee, the Coalition to Abolish Death by Incarceration, the Movement of Immigrant Leaders in Pennsylvania, UU Justice PA, ACT UP Philadelphia, March on Harrisburg, the Thomas Merton Center, Marcellus Outreach Butler, the Global Women's Strike, and Put People First Pennsylvania. This is a movement and not a moment. Our deadline is victory. All roads lead to Washington, D.C. on June 18th for the Mass Poor People's and Low-Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls. Tonight, you're going to hear why it is necessary for us to mobilize in great numbers towards this generationally transformative event. Please make a commitment tonight to be there and to bring 5 to 50 additional people with you from your faith community, your union, your organization, your neighborhood, and your family. I would like to thank all the volunteers that are working with us tonight, the interpretation team, Zoraida, Osa, and everyone here who is helping out. This is a collective effort, and I want to thank you for all that you do. And I will introduce my co-chair, Rabbi Michael Pollack.
Hello, I am Rabbi Michael Pollack with March on Harrisburg and the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival. I'd like to start by just thanking all of the volunteers. Many of you have been here all day, and thank you for your work, for making sure people are safe, people know where to go, that we're fed and taken care of. Thank you, everybody who helped with the march, and thank you, everyone, for being here. Welcome to Pennsylvania. Welcome to Pennsylvania, where the words of the prophet Ezekiel ring true. In you are people who take bribes to shed blood. Welcome to Pennsylvania, where bribery is legal, corruption runs rampant, and democracy is on the defense. Welcome to Pennsylvania, where gifts are legal, campaign contributions are unlimited, side jobs are legal, the revolving door spins dizzying, and independent expenditures, dark money, are untracked and unlimited. Welcome to Pennsylvania, where the voice of the people needs to come together and be heard. Because right now in Pennsylvania, the words of Isaiah are too true. Your rulers are rebels, partners with thieves. They chase after bribes. The widow and the orphan's cause does not come before them. Welcome to Pennsylvania, where it's time to build a movement. Welcome to Pennsylvania, where it's time to come together, get in step, and march forward together and have justice. I'd like to thank Brandis Mazik and Brian Morrison, the ASL interpreters with the Deaf Hearing Communication Center, who have donated their services here tonight. And again, thank you to all of the volunteers who have come out. And again, welcome to Pennsylvania, where it's time to get in step and it's time to march to DC on June 18th.
Good evening. My name is Sherelle Barber. I am a part of the Poor People's Campaign COVID-19 Health Justice Advisory Committee, and it is so wonderful to welcome you to the city of Philadelphia, where I've now called Philadelphia my home for the last 8 years. I want to thank some of the elected officials who work so tirelessly on behalf of the poor and working class. Particularly shout out to Kendra Brooks, who's a council member here in the city of Philadelphia. As a social epidemiologist, I join many of my public health colleagues around the nation who are both grieved and outraged at the tragic, avoidable, and unjust loss of life that we have witnessed over the past 2 years. An invisible airborne virus has proven to us that we are caught up in an inescapable network of mutuality and has shown us with vivid detail the deadly consequences of systemic poverty and systemic racism in our nation. Here in the city of Philadelphia, the poorest big city in the nation, we have felt the toll of COVID-19 viscerally, as it has exacerbated the entrenched inequities that existed prior to the pandemic. Just ask the families and communities who have lost too many loved ones, the young children who have lost mamas and daddies and aunties and uncles, the Black doctors who have made a way out of no way to provide our most too often forgotten Black, brown, and poor communities access to testing and vaccines when the system failed us. Just ask pastors who have preached too many funerals, the hospital janitors who have had to help to bag the bodies, the Black mamas being violently evicted from their homes because they have been deprived of a way to make ends meet, or the undocumented workers who are forced to work in unhealthy and unsafe conditions. Just ask the person without health care who is now living with the long-term and debilitating effects of a mild COVID-19. Just ask the members of City Council who have been fighting tooth and nail for our poor and working families. Just ask the young man who had this to say during a community conversation we held back in December 2020. What's a pandemic to someone who is already experiencing a survival mentality? Just ask us, and we will tell you how inhumane it is to ignore 1 million deaths in an attempt to rush back to normal, a normal that was killing us. Just ask us, and we will tell you that the Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, is absolutely necessary in this moment. Our city, our nation, and our world need a healing. And we are being called in this moment to be the healers. Everybody, say that with me, everybody has a right to live, and we must join this movement to fight for a way forward that honors our shared humanity. Justice demands nothing less of us, and our collective lives depend on it. Thank you.
Our collective lives do depend on it. And now we're coming to the part of the program we get to hear from some of the real heroes and heroines of this city, of this state, of this region, of this Poor People's Campaign. We're here to listen to the stories and the solutions coming from poor and impacted people. And it seems only right when we do so that instead of applauding folks after they have poured out their hearts, that we instead say in unison, somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Can we try that one time? Somebody's been hurting our people. It's been going on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. So please, as folks do join us, give them a round of applause as they come. I'm going to introduce the first 5 speakers who will come one after another, and then we'll have a little bit of music, and then we'll hear some other testifiers. So I want to introduce Melvin Harston, Kearney Warren, Marcela Ramirez, Carolyn Hill, and Seppi Schiller. Melvin Harston.
Hola a todos, mi nombre es Marcela y es un honor para mí estar aquí con nuestra campaña de la gente pobre de Pensilvania. Soy miembro de MILPA, el movimiento de inmigrantes líderes en Pensilvania. Soy uno de los millones de trabajadores esenciales de este país. Somos los que producimos demasiada riqueza para esta nación. Los que no podemos darnos el lujo de descansar durante la pandemia. Estoy aquí para exigir el respeto, el derecho básico para los 11 millones de americanos indocumentados y de todos nosotros los 140 millones de personas pobres en este país.
Hello, my name is Marcela, and I am honored to be here with our Pennsylvania's Poor People's Campaign. I'm a member of MILPA, the Movement of Immigrant Leaders in Pennsylvania. I am one of millions of essential workers in this country. We are the ones who produce immense wealth for this nation, the ones who cannot rest during the pandemic. I am here to demand respect and basic rights for the 11 million undocumented Americans and all of us, the 140 million poor people in this country.
Yo trabajo más de 8 horas diarias en fábrica empacando frutas y verduras. Todos los días salgo de mi casa muy temprano y llego muy noche a casa. Necesito el dinero para poder sostener a mi hija y poder pagar mi renta. Me imagino un mundo en donde no tenga que matarme trabajando tanto y poder pagar mis cuentas. Un mundo en donde paso más tiempo con mi hija y menos tiempo en el trabajo. Un mundo así es posible, pero nosotros los pobres y desposeídos debemos trabajar juntos para crearlo.
I work more than 8 hours a day in a factory, packing fruit and vegetables. Every day I leave my house very early and I arrive home very late at night. I need the money to support my daughter and pay my rent. I envision a world where I don't have to work so hard to pay my bills. A world where I spend more time with my daughter and less time at work. Such a world is possible. If you don't believe me, ask the millionaires who enjoy this privilege, which should be a basic right for all workers.
En Milpa estamos luchando por una reforma migratoria en este país, un camino a la ciudadanía para 11 millones o más personas. Necesitamos una protección permanente para cada familia ya. Que este cambio nos beneficie a todos. Sin embargo, el único cambio que recibimos bajo esta administración son 2 nuevos centros de detención aquí. Uno de ellos es el centro de detención más grande del noroeste del país y el único centro de detención en Pensilvania, propiedad de una empresa privada, donde la empresa recibe ganancias por las encarcelaciones. Cada deportación, detención, representa una familia separada. En este país siempre hay dinero para financiar la detención y deportación de la gente pobre y trabajadora, pero nunca hay dinero para nuestra legalización, para acceso a salud médica, para salarios dignos. Eso es inmoral.
We are in a fight for immigration reform in this country, for a path to citizenship for 11 million or more people. We need permanent protection for every family. This change will make us safer. But the only change we have seen under this administration are 2 new detention centers here in Pennsylvania. One of them is the largest detention center in the Northeast, and the only detention center in Pennsylvania owned by a private company. The GO Group receives profits from the incarceration and separation of families. For poor and working people, there is always money, detention, and deportation, but there is never money for our legalization, for our health care, for living wages. That is immoral.
Mis compañeros de Milpa y yo estamos movilizando a Washington, Distrito Central, el 18 de junio, porque queremos ser escuchados, queremos ser tratados con igualdad y dignidad en este país. Seguimos en la lucha por un sistema de migración justa, humana y segura para cada persona, por un camino a la ciudadanía, por licencias de conducir aquí en Pensilvania. Les invitamos a todos a unirse con nosotros. Unidos pa'lante, ni un paso atrás.
All of us in Milpa are mobilizing to Washington, D.C. on June 18th because we want to be heard. We want to be treated as equals in this country. Let's keep fighting for a path to citizenship, for driver's license here in Pennsylvania, and for a fair, humane, and safe immigration system for every person. We invite you all to join us. Forward together, not one step back.
Hello, glory be to God. Thank you for having us. We are representatives of the University City Townhouses.
that are set to be demolished in just a few months. We are being attacked in many ways. I thank the PPC for having us here today to speak to you on displacement and all forms of attack against poor and low-income families. We are here to fight against these corporate moguls, real estate developers, and slick politicians that stand against us. It's time for change. Change must be done, and it must be done now. We will stand in this fight for change because there is no other option. Excuse me. And today, we as representatives of University City Townhouses, we will stand with y'all in this fight for how long it takes, no matter how difficult the task is. Whatever it takes, we will stand together. We must stand together, and we must stand strong. Our communities are being destroyed. Our communities are being taken from us. Our children are being deprived of the necessary resources that they need to survive. We will not stand for this. Thank you. I'm going to turn the floor over to Ms. Darlene Foreman.
Once again, thanks for having us. I'm one of 68 residents that lives in University City Townhomes, owned by Altman Management Company, and we're about to be displaced, so they say, on July the 8th. But we're gonna fight them. We've been fighting and protesting all over the place and doing everything necessary to protect our families. We're gonna continue to fight, as Melvin said. We're even gonna be out there June 18th for that March on Washington. Because if we all stick together and stand strong, we can't be defeated, especially with God first. So thank you for having us. And I also want to invite you to our movie night on Friday, April the 29th from 8 until 9:30. Please bring a chair and your support. Thank you so much.
So somebody in displacing our families, it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. I'm going to bring up now Kearney Warden, and as she's coming, I'm going to remind us that this is a really important part of our program. And thousands of people are joining us online. So we're going to try to keep to a couple minutes, 2 minutes each, so that we can have a chance to hear all of these powerful testimonies. And we're going to be in the audience cheering them on, encouraging folks, and reminding us that somebody's been hurting our people, and it's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
Environmental racism is a result of systemic processes of redlining. Environmental racism and climate destruction are rooted in the systemic processes of white supremacy, colonization, capitalism, and patriarchy. So it's not a coincidence that Chester, where I live, was named the worst case of environmental racism in our country. The power structure of white supremacy stole and squandered the resources from where I live, essentially defunding my community and planting hazardous industries in my backyard, causing different types of health issues as well as death. The Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection labeled Chester as an environmental justice community, yet the system protects companies like Vanguard who invest in companies that pollute our air. The executives of these hazardous businesses go home, live in their safer suburban communities while breathing less polluted, cleaner air, while my community is forced to get sick and die from the toxins we inhale from the actions of their greed. The system makes it hard for communities like mine to use protections like the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act and the Pennsylvania Environmental Rights Amendment that state that we have a right to clean air and clean water. Cancer is a huge problem in my community. My mother and father were diagnosed with cancer. I have family members that live on the same block where 2 incinerators are located in Chester. When I asked, was my mother's tumor a result of hereditary once she got tested, they told me no. So I went out and got genetic testing and counseling done because I live in Chester. I was told that I do not have cancer genes, but my environment and the air quality that I breathe is could lead to cancer diagnosis.
All right. Somebody's been polluting our environment. It's been going on for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. I introduce Carolyn Hill.
Hi, everybody. My name is Carolyn Hill. I'm with the Women of Color in the Global Women's Strike, and Every Mother is a Working Mother Network. I am a mother of 5, 2 deceased, 3 still living. I'm a grandmother of 16, which I had 3 in my custody. I was also a kinship carer for 2 of my nieces. My sister was having a mental issue problem, so out of the love for her and her children, I agreed to take them in. The girls was placed with me. They were doing fine. I had a roof over my head, I had food in my refrigerator, and the girls was doing fine, well cared. But then Child Welfare Department said I was too poor to raise them. I fought back by protesting, writing letters, and getting support. But they gave the girls to a more distant family member who is not close to my sister, who has more money, and I haven't seen them since 2013. I'm with the group I work with are fighting for more money for mothers and grandmothers for work of caregiving. The child tax credit was a good godsend for me and my family. It helped me pay my bills, kept cable on for the grandchildren, buy them clothes, take them to the amusement park. If I had the child tax credit earlier, child welfare might not have taken my nieces from me. Now that the child tax credit is gone, we are back in the poorhouse again. We don't get to go out on family outing. No more Taco Tuesdays, no more movie night, no more pizza night. I'm not getting a break. The child tax credit was helping me catch up on my bills. Now I have to juggle them again. Plus, food went up. 5 pounds of chicken wings, $17.99. Toilet paper then doubled its price, 10 rolls for $10.99. It's a struggle because they didn't put up food stamps with the child tax credit being shut off. Some people are going to be hungry again. Without the child tax credit, mothers on welfare, TANF, as I was, are back to struggling to survive on a $403 a month for a family of 3. That hasn't changed since 1990. We are demanding an increase, and we say no to work requirement for the child tax credit or TANF. Every mother is a working mother. That's why I'm going to Washington, D.C. with the Poor People's Campaign on June 18th to fight for the child tax credit, TANF, and other money for caregiving. We are making the world go round. As Reverend Liz said, take away our poverty, not our children.
That's right. Somebody's been hurting our children. It's gone on for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. I now introduce Steffi Schiller.
Hi, everyone. I'm Steffi Schiller. I'm a member of Put People First. And I'm going to speak a little bit about the military complex. So my father, he immigrated from the Philippines and joined the Navy. Growing up on military bases, I was fed the lie that America was the world's savior, that who served would be honored and celebrated. Well, if this were true, then 29% of the junior enlisted would not be food insecure, and also there would not be veterans on the streets. Instead of supporting families, they're pumping money into bombs and occupations. The military is being privatized at an alarming rate. One Pentagon contractor CEO was paid over $35 billion, while at the same time, soldiers are overseas while their families are at food banks. The military did not necessarily give my family a step up. I'm still drowning in school debt, and my father, after serving in the Navy for 30 years and being a Desert Storm veteran, he got a job after retirement because he couldn't survive in California on his pension. So what he ended up doing was going back to the Philippines so he could live without having to work after 30 years of being in the military. So the military budget also takes resources from the general public, as in public education, anti-poverty measures, and also they are degrading the environment. Locally, we know about the PFAS, which are known as forever chemicals, and these are widely used by the military. They have not only contaminated bases, but also drinking water in areas as close as Montco, where I live. So the effects of the military complex are more far-reaching than just those that serve. And so we cannot stand for contaminated water. We cannot stand for hungry military families. We can't stand for vets on the streets, a broken VA system. And we definitely can't stand by while the military budget is robbing our country. Think of all these things that this money could be used for, other than death and destruction. And we can no longer allow the poor to be victims of this military machine. No longer can this be allowed to happen. And the poor and the dispossessed, they deserve more. And that's why I stand here as a member of Put People First, and I stand with the Poor People's Campaign. Thank you very much.
Somebody is militarizing our communities. It's gone on for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore.
And it's gonna, I tell you it's gonna, far too low. I tell you it's gonna, far too low. Somebody's hurting my brother, and it's gonna, far too low. And we won't be silent anymore. Did you hear? Somebody's displacing our family.
That's right, that's right, that's right. So we have some more powerful testimonies, and then we'll have a call to action. So I want to introduce Jessica Boyles, Walter Harris, Dee Marquis Hall, and Sylvia. And we'll go in that order, and we'll sing Somebody's Been Hurting Our People after each one.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jessica. I live in Northeast Pennsylvania, and I'm a home health care aide. In the spring of 2020, when the pandemic hit, and suddenly I was essential and I was a hero, I was also a healthcare worker without health insurance. And at $11 an hour, I made too much for Medicaid, but not enough to buy insurance. I looked for a new job, offering health insurance benefits, and the best I could find was an agency requiring a full year of employment before benefits kicked in. I took that job, and I worked that year because I was desperate, only to find that my benefits were so low and my deductible so high that I couldn't actually afford to use it. I'd also like to tell you about Richard. Richard is an 84-year-old former client of mine who requires 24-hour care. When an agency takes a case, they are legally required to fill all of those hours. This never happened in the 6 months I worked for Richard. He was routinely left without a caretaker in excess of 8 hours, in full knowledge of my supervisor and the county caseworker. I watched coworkers burn themselves out and quit trying to meet these unfilled hours, believing that the agency or the county would soon fix the problem. But I knew better by then. So I would stop in as often as I could to get him to the bathroom, to get him out of his own soiled brief, causing him urine burns. But I lived with guilt for those 6 months. Every time I chose to take care of myself rather than fill in extra hours for Richard. How do people expect workers to show up day in and day out with those levels of demoralization when we can't even get our own health insurance? And the audacity of our leaders to turn the problem around on us and tell us it's our fault, that we're loafing off handouts, that we're too lazy to get back to work after a pandemic has destroyed and devastated our communities and killed 1 million of us. I am angry and I am affronted. And that is why I am part of the fight here in Pennsylvania for a public health care advocate, and I'm part of the fight against the efforts of our state legislature to cut people off of their Medicaid. And that is why I will mobilize me and mine to show up in Washington on June 18th for the Poor People's Moral March on Washington.
Yes, yes. Somebody's been stealing our health care. It's been going on for far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Walter.
Right.
That's it. Give it up for him.
All right. Hello, Philadelphia, city of brotherly love. Thank you. I'm a formerly homeless, from the bottom up, testify, impacted individual from New Jersey, Poor People's Campaign. I also represent a nonprofit that is pretty much going to outline my story. It's called Shiloh, Supporting the Homeless, Innovatively Loving Others. In essence, it was a church like this at 18 years old that I came into. I had no place to stay, spoiled as a ward of the court, adopted by a suburban white family. Then I made some mistakes. I went to the criminal system. Came home, made some more mistakes, committed some crimes of poverty. But then I never gave up. I learned the law. I listened to my mentors. I went to city council meetings. I talked back against these injustices. I mobilized, I organized, I recruited, I educated folks. And next thing you know, I became an entrepreneur. But what I'm talking about tonight is from the bottom up, and for a voice for the voiceless, There's an estimated 8,097 homeless in New Jersey. 629 of those people are in Middlesex County, and 138 are unsheltered, allegedly. There's an asterisk star on this point in time count that says these are estimated numbers. No one was outside during COVID-19, and the homeless had no place to quarantine. Numerically speaking, this injustice has numerous faces, from no place to quarantine to not being able to go into public spaces. I mean, let's be honest, criminal histories, disabilities, and chronic health conditions, they're not welcome certain places. We demand as a voice to the voiceless that HUD, DCA, county, municipal leadership become accountable, lowering eligibilities for these programs, creating more housing, establishing equity in public policy. Why? Because it starts with reentry services. It starts with the forgotten man. It starts with people with chronic health conditions like POTS, that if they walk up the steps, they might pass out. It starts with people like that that have to leave the state in order to get disability. That's not just. And not only that, these services, they increase life expectancy. That's what it's about. So June 18th, come with us. Be at DC. Thank you.
Yes, that's right. Somebody's been hurting the homeless. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. DeMarco. That's right. Let's get up front.
How y'all doing? All right. I was born in Chester, Pennsylvania as well. I'm here to represent Delaware, but Chester's not too far from here. And just a week ago, the day before Easter, a 4-year-old girl was buried. A 4-year-old girl that was shot by her 2-year-old brother in the backseat of a car that was parked at the gas station. The baby boy got a hold of the gun. When my mother was pregnant with me, she was in prison. We were separated at birth. With technology today, time we can make almost stand still, but we can't go back and undo it. We can do our best to preserve the legacies we want to protect. Martin Luther King Jr. completed his seminary in Chester, at the same place where I was born, Crozer Theological Seminary. And where I live and train in Wilmington, Delaware, there are no shortage of lost dreams, hopes, opportunities. There are no shortage of poor people with my background who don't realize that they have the power to vote, to organize, to educate, to run for office, to write, and to press for policy change that will help the most impacted people. The demand that we have for economic equality for our families to impact us in a positive way. Most of us realize that we do have the power to exercise our Second Amendment right instead of our first one. In Georgia, where my mother and grandmother moved to, where they live now in Austell, side of Atlanta, they just moved from Decatur, I just helped them. They're celebrating being able to get guns without background checks. We don't want to be equal in mass shootings, in suicides, in accidental infantile deaths. That's not the kind of equality that King talked about. New York, South Carolina, Pittsburgh, my kin, black people. And it's been 12 generations since American chattel slavery. And we stand here in this great nation's first capital, Welcome to Philadelphia, home of the University of Pennsylvania, where they kept the bones of black children murdered by the city's government in 1985. The move bombing, and they shared those bones with Princeton. I'm currently reading Caste by Princeton graduate professor and Pulitzer Prize winner Isabel Wilkerson. Caste. In that book, she says, just as DNA is the code of instructions for cell development, caste is the operating system for economic, political, and social interaction in the United States from its gestation, from the time of the birth of this nation. I'm from the first state. That's where I live. First state in this great nation, Delaware. The state where our president hails from, where he claims. But he was born in Pennsylvania like me. Like me. Like us. Here we are. In The Soul of Black Folk by W.E.B. Du Bois, this is my last quote. In The Soul of Black Folks by W.E.B. Du Bois, he says, to be a poor man is hard, but to be a poor race in a land of dollars is the very bottom of hardships. When he wrote that, he was in Atlanta before King was born. This was 1903, same year as the Wright brothers made the first airplane, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina. This is 1903. W.B. Du Bois said this. To be a poor man is hard, but to be a poor race in a land of dollars is the very bottom of hardships. When I was just in Atlanta, after I learned about the 4-year-old girl, I was driving with my grandmother in her car, depressed and angry and worried for our future. Forward together.
Somebody's been hurting our people. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. Our final testifier is Sylvia.
Please wear your mask.
Hola, mi nombre es Silvia, miembro de New Labor y trabajadora doméstica.
Hello, my name is Sylvia. I'm a member of Labor and a domestic worker.
Las trabajadoras domésticas están expuestas a muchas contaminaciones, maltrato y discriminación porque el trabajo doméstico empezó por la esclavitud.
Domestic workers are exposed to many contaminations, mistreatment, and discrimination because domestic work originated from slavery.
A lo principal, no tenemos salarios justos, jubilación o contrato por escrito.
Mainly, we don't have a minimum wage, we don't have written contracts, and we don't have basic protections other workers have.
Y por eso estoy aquí con ustedes de parte de New Labor.
And that's why I'm here with you in behalf of New Labor. We support you.
Nosotros estamos luchando por una carta de derechos a nivel estatal en New Jersey para las trabajadoras domésticas.
And at this moment, we are fighting for a New Jersey Domestic Workers Bill of Rights.
Nosotras las trabajadoras domésticas queremos las mismas protecciones y derechos de los trabajadores estadounidenses.
As domestic workers, we deserve the same rights and protections as any other workers and Americans. Not disposable. We are not invisible, as this racial system tells us.
Queremos ser visibles, queremos tener jubilación, queremos los contratos por escrito.
We don't want to be invisible anymore. We want to be visible. We want to have the basic protections such as written contracts, minimum wage.
Las trabajadoras domésticas se lo merecen y por eso estoy aquí para lograr los sueños de las trabajadoras domésticas.
Domestic workers to have these basic protections. And that's why I am here, because we at this moment are achieving our dreams that domestic workers have been fighting for so long.
Y ya va a ser real. Por seguir luchando, si no hay un salario mínimo justo, seguimos en pobreza. Aquí en los Estados Unidos se trabaja mucho.
And because domestic workers have no basic protections, we still suffer from not having a set wage. And because we don't have a set wage, we are still in poverty.
Porque todo cuesta mucho. La medicina. Acompáñanos a las fechas de audiencia de la Carta de Derechos en New Jersey. Va a ser el 12 de mayo en Trenton.
And that's why, because there's no wage, minimum wage, that we don't have enough money to buy our medicine, to pay what we need to pay. And that's why I'm inviting you all to come to the Senate committee sessions that will be held in Trenton, May 12th. There will be sessions that are going to talk about the Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights, and people such as Sylvia would tell their stories about why we need a Domestic Workers' Bill of Rights.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Somebody's been hurting our workers. It's gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. I now welcome some of our faith leaders who are going to lead us in a litany. Pastor Keisha Spellman, Sheikh Aziz Nathu, and Rabbi Elise Wechterman.
Throughout our sacred scriptures and the world's religions, traditions, we hear the cry to stop depriving the rights of the poor and profiting from the pandemic and crisis. We hear the prophets of old from the sacred texts of the world's religions who proclaim,
This is what the Lord says. Do what is just and right. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the immigrant, the children, or the widow. And do not shed innocent blood. Jeremiah 22:3.
Whenever righteousness is on the decline, unrighteousness is in the ascendant, then I am reincarnated for the protection of the virtuous, for the extirpation of the evildoers, and for establishing Dharma, righteousness, on a firm footing. I am born from age to age. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, 7, 8.
the believers are in charge of and responsible for one another. They all enjoin the doing of what is right and forbid
All the workers you've exploited and cheated cry out for judgment. The groans of the workers you used and abused are a roar in the ears of God. James chapter 5, verse 4.
This evening, we have heard such cries, and we join our voices to those crying, someone's been hurting our people, and it has gone on far too long, and we won't be silent anymore. And we declare
it's time for a moral move out of our democracy and fully address poverty and low wages from the bottom up. We will assemble and march on June 18th at the Mass Poor People and Low Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls. Join us as we compel the nation to mourn, feel the pain and power of our people, and march on the path to healing and justice.
I'm ready. Are you ready? Are you ready for a change? Are you ready for a meeting? Are you ready for a radical redistribution of political and economic power to right all the wrongs of society, to turn this country upside down and right side up, and to gather for a mass poor people's and low-wage workers' assembly, a moral march on Washington and to the polls. Good evening, Philadelphia. Good evening, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, Delaware. Good evening, these yet-to-be United States. It is powerful to be here with you, to join with generations of activists and freedom fighters who have insisted that justice and love and truth must moral values and to change this society from the bottom up. It's powerful to feel in the streets as we marched from City Hall, the vibrations, the echoes of marches and protests led by Mother Jones, led by Cecil B. Moore, Roxanne Jones, Mumia Abdul-Jamal, LGBTQ activists, ACT UP, Movement for Black Lives, high school students from South Philly and West Philly and North Philly, taxi drivers and Fight for 15, domestic workers and labor organizers, and the National Union of the Homeless, who has its roots here on these streets in this city, and so many more. We know this city, we know this state, we know this region, we know this country is in need, desperate need of a movement. And so, look at yourselves. We're building one. We are building one. Now, we are just blocks away from the Liberty Bell, and it has this powerful inscription on it from Leviticus in the Hebrew Bible. It was taken up in the abolitionist movement by folks like Frederick Douglass. That inscription that says we must proclaim liberty throughout the land. That quote is about Jubilee. And you know what Jubilee is about? The canceling of debts. Anyone have some debts you need canceled? Jubilee is about releasing those enslaved, anybody enslaved to racism and economic injustice. Jubilee is about paying workers a living wage. I've heard us say we need living wages, and we need them now. Jubilee is about organizing society around the needs of those left out and locked up and looked over. Jubilee is lifting from the bottom so that everybody can rise. Now that word Jubilee, it comes from a Hebrew word. Rabbi, is it okay if we go there? Hovel. It means a trumpet blast of liberty. It was said that on the day of liberation, the sound of the ram's horn would ring throughout the land. Well, I heard some singing and some trumpet blowing and some dancing as we marched down JFK Boulevard to this hallowed place. singing, "We who believe in freedom cannot rest." Which side are you on? What do we want? Health care? When do we want it? Now? We are declaring here that inscription on the Liberty Bell. We declare Jubilee. And guess what, y'all? We are building the power to make it so. From the back of that truck, Jacob said to us, what do we want? Everything. Everything. Healthcare and housing and education and immigrant rights and clean water and clean air and everybody in, nobody out. What do we want? Everything. When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? What do we want? When do we want it? And if we don't get it, if we don't get it, if we don't get it, and that is what we're doing. June 18th on Pennsylvania Avenue, thousands upon thousands of poor and low-income people, clergy, activists, advocates from all across the country, including here in Pennsylvania, are gonna shut it down, make this country listen, prick its consciousness, and then build and organize and mobilize and build and organize and mobilize the largest movement of the poor that has ever been, so that we can indeed not just declare and sing out Jubilee, but then live it so. So I got a question for you, Philadelphia. Are you ready? Are you ready for a change? Are you ready for social transformation? Are you ready to move forward together and not one step back? Because I heard us singing something on those streets. I heard us saying, we are ready, we are ready, we're ready, here we come. We are ready,
We are ready. We are ready. Here it comes. We are ready. 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 Here it comes. We are ready. We are ready. We are ready. Here it comes. We are ready. We are ready. We're ready.
Here we come.
We are ready. We are ready. We're ready. Here we come.
O'Neill Jackson, the Executive Director of the Mass Poor People and Low-Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls, who's going to keep on giving us our marching orders.
Thank you, Dr. Liz. Good evening, Philadelphia. All right, are you ready? I've come tonight, and I know some of us are starting to leave, but I want you to hold on for just a little bit longer. We're almost there. We're almost at the end. I've come all the way, a native of the Delta of Mississippi, Indianola, Sunflower County, by way of Memphis and Washington, D.C. and New York, and I've come just with a question: are you ready? Are you ready for change? Are you ready for social transformation? Are you ready for a meeting? The Poor People's Campaign, a national call for moral revival, calling this nation together for a meeting. Washington, D.C., June 18th. The Mass Poor People's Low-Wage Workers Assembly and Moral March on Washington and to the polls. Say to the polls. And to the polls, June 18th. Listen, I'm almost done. Just want to give you a few things here. We're going to start around 10 a.m. on June 18th. In around 3 p.m., we're going to gather at 3rd and Pennsylvania Avenue in the shadow of the Capitol. In case you come up a day earlier, we'll have a massive communal meal at Freedom Plaza for our unhoused family and friends and early arrivals, followed by a candlelight memorial service for the million-plus people we've lost to COVID and other injustices and evils that plague us still. We will call this nation to mourn and weep and lament. Repent with us. And then the big meeting the next day. I'm telling you tonight that this meeting will be a major, massive, transformative, generational, disruptive gathering, not just for a day, but a declaration of an ongoing, committed moral movement to shift the political narrative, build power, and call this nation to fully address poverty and low wealth from the bottom up. This will be the largest gathering in history of poor and low wealth people and their moral allies coming together for a meeting. We're building a huge stage, saying to the world and to the nation, we're coming in the name of love, we're coming in the name of justice and truth as a moral assembly march to make the nation see us, our faces and realities, hear us, our pain and agenda, feel us, our moral authority and votes, and not just the nation, but the world. And what do we need from you? We need you to tell everybody, family and friends and colleagues and co-workers and neighbors and folks on your block and in your apartment, in churches and clubs and schools and communities. Everyone reach out. Reach 10 and we win. Reach 5 and we thrive. Reach 14, 140, 1,400 and we soar. Go to poorpeoplescampaign.org. Everything is there. Sign up, find a bus, Rally Co., a bus ride-sharing service, preset trips already set up, trips already coming from Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. Get on a bus, get on a train, get on a plane, get in the car. Some folks are even walking. Did you know? All roads lead to Washington, D.C. Listen, there are pledge cards. We're at the end. Hold on. There are pledge cards. The co-leaders of the Pennsylvania campaign, I want you to come. Michael, Rabbi Michael is coming. Other co-leads are coming. I want you to prepare with your pledge card. We're asking some of you to consider being mobilizing captains, mobilizing partners. Somebody said, well, what does that mean? I'm glad you asked. You asked such good questions. It simply means that you're not going to just come by yourself, but you're going to bring somebody else. Bring one, bring 10, bring 100 more. You're going to bring somebody else. And maybe even we want to ask you tonight or even later to give a little money if you can so that more poor and low wealth people can come and be with us on June 18th. Everybody in, nobody out. Somebody is hurting our people, and we won't be silent anymore. I'm going to ask the praise band, the band to come, kind of sing, bring your pledge cards. You can bring them in the trays up front or even leave them at the back. But let's come. Everybody in, nobody out. Somebody's hurting our people, and we're not going to be silent anymore. Are you ready for the meeting? Are you ready for the meeting? Let's stand. Let's come. Bring your pledge cards.
There's a meeting in Washington. I belong. I belong. I belong. There's a meeting in Washington. I belong. I belong at the meeting. There's a meeting in Washington. Oh, I belong. I belong. There's a meeting in Washington. We are building power. I belong. We are building power. I belong. I belong at the meeting. We are shining a light on poverty. I belong. I belong. I belong. We are shining a light on poverty. I belong. I belong at the meeting. Come on. Oh, the meeting in Washington. I belong. Oh, I belong. I belong. Oh, there's a meeting in Washington. I belong. I said I belong at the meeting. We are changing hearts. I belong. I belong. I belong. We are changing hearts. I belong. I belong at the meeting. There's a meeting. There's a meeting in Washington. I belong. I belong. I belong. There's a meeting in Washington. I belong. I belong at the meeting. I belong. I said I belong at the meeting. Go ahead, Jacob. Oh, there's a meeting in Washington. I belong. I belong. Me. I belong at the meeting. Oh yeah. Forward together.
Not one step back. Hey, can we get one big round of applause for our amazing band? Give it up, give it up, give it up. Give it up for yourself.